Hello, this is Pussnboots, and thank you for listening to Biased Propaganda Radio. And thank you to the listeners for joining us. Tonight we're going to be talking about Admiral Byrd and my thoughts on this vary. And I wanted to start by talking about it is not about Admiral Byrd. It is not possible to know the history of the polar regions or undertake scientific investigation of the areas without being aware of Admiral Byrd or by benefiting from his contributions. As a navigational aviator, Byrd pioneered in the technology that would be the foundation for modern polar exploration and investigation. As a decorated and much celebrated hero, Byrd drew popular attention to the areas of scientific investigation in numerous disciplines. Finally, as a naval officer, Admiral Byrd contributed to the role of government in sponsoring and facilitating research in polar regions and topics. Portrait Richard Byrd first made his mark in the U.S. Navy, graduating with the class of 1912 from the U.S. Naval Academy. He served in the battleship fleet until forced into medical retirement in 1916 from the after effects of a smashed ankle suffered while a midshipman. Recalled to active duty in a retired status, he organized the Commission on Training Camps. In April 1918, he won his wings as Naval Aviator 608. From the start of his flying career, he demonstrated unusual ability. Byrd pioneered the technique of nighttime landings of seaplanes on the ocean and flew out over the horizon, out of sight of land, and navigated back to his base. In 1918, he proposed flying the newly built NC-1 flying boats across the Atlantic to the war zone in France. His war service was in Canada as a commander, U.S. Naval Air Forces, with the responsibility for 2 air bases in Nova Scotia. With the conclusion of hostilities, Byrd was called to Washington and made responsible for the navigational preparations for the transatlantic flight attempt of the NC flying boats in 1919. He was a skilled officer in representing naval interests under consideration by the Congress. Byrd won wide acclaim for directing the lobbying effort that resulted in the first post-war pay raise for military personnel. Byrd was also invaluable in the long campaign of naval aviators to establish a Bureau of Aeronautics. Interested in polar exploration from childhood, his adult involvement began in 1924 when he was appointed navigator for the proposed transpolar flight of the Navy's dirigible Shenandoah from Alaska to Spitsbergen. When the flight was canceled by President Coolidge, Byrd began to organize his own Navy flight expedition to the Arctic. He was compelled to join forces with the Macmillan expedition to northwest Greenland, sponsored by the National Geographic Society in 1925. At that time, Byrd completed the first flights over Ellesmere Island and the interior of Greenland. North Pole flight in 1926, he took leave from the Navy to organize a privately financed expedition to the Arctic, which was to be based in Spitsbergen. Plans included several flights over the pack ice, including one to the North Pole. Supported by Edsel Ford, John D. Rockefeller Jr., the New York Times, and others, Byrd and his pilot Floyd Bennett claimed to have reached the North Pole by May 9, 1926. Both men were awarded the Medal of Honor after their return to the United States. In later years, the scholars have raised questions about the success of the expedition in flying over the North Pole. Cleared by the outpouring of public support and admiration, Byrd continued his leave from the Navy. With commercial sponsorship, he completed the first multi-engine airplane crossing of the Atlantic to France. Byrd then turned his sights to Antarctica in 1928, South Pole flight. During the remaining years of his life, he was involved in 5 expeditions to Antarctica. These explorations accounted for the discovery of hundreds of thousands of square miles of territory which were claimed for the United States. He personified the inception of the mechanical era of Antarctic exploration. No other person in Antarctic history has contributed more to the geographic discovery of the continent than Byrd. At 3:29 p.m. on November 28, 1929, the Floyd Bennett took off from Little America on its historic first flight over the South Pole, with Byrd as navigator, Harold June as co-pilot and radio operator, and McKinley as aerial photographer. The heavy loaded plane proceeded to climb towards Queen Mud Mountains. For purposes of navigation, magnetic compasses were useless so close to the South Magnetic Pole. Thus, reliance was solely on the sun compass. Belchin flew south on the meridian of 163 degrees 45 west, and when they reached 85 degrees south, they scanned the horizon in vain for Amundsen's Carmen Land. At 8:15, the geological party was spotted below, 100 miles from the base of the Queen Maud Mountains. A bag containing messages and photographs taken from the base lane flight were dropped by parachute. The geological party radioed their position, from which Byrd checked his navigation. From this point, the plane began to gain altitude as it neared the glacier-filled passes of the Queen Maud Mountains. By 9:15 p.m., they had climbed to 9,000 feet, but were still 2,000 feet too short to attain the polar plateau. As the plane ascended to the Live Glacier, empty tin containers of gasoline and 300 pounds of food were dumped out in order to reduce weight. For the next 30 minutes, the Floyd Bennett struggled to gain the necessary altitude to clear and gained enough altitude to gain the polar plateau. As they flew over the polar plateau, a new mountain range, the Grosvenor Mountains, was viewed to the west and southwest. They could identify the Mount Thorvald-Nilsen Massif, now called Nilsen Plateau. On the polar plateau, the plane passed over a heavily crevassed area, the Devil's Ballroom, named by Amundsen. Observations at 12:30 a.m. showed them to be 50 miles from the pole. Shortly after midnight on November 29, 1929, the Floyd Bennett flew over the South Pole. They flew a few miles beyond the pole and then to the right and left to compensate for any possible navigational errors. Byrd then dropped a small American flag and at 1:25 a.m. directed the plane for Little America. They descended on the polar plateau and the Axel Heiberg Glacier on the east side of Mount Fridtjof Nansen. At the foot of the glacier, they flew along the front of the Queen Maud Mountains to the base of Amundsen Glacier. At this point, a short fuel supply forced them to turn west for the gasoline that had been cached at the foot of the glacier on November 18th. They landed beside the gasoline, took aboard 200 gallons, and left 350 pounds of food for the geological party. Within an hour, they took off again and landed at Little America at 10:10 a.m. on November 29th. They had been gone 18 hours and 41 minutes. Byrd remained a promoter of Antarctic exploration. He merged his plans for a third private expedition with governmental plans and became the commanding officer of the United States Antarctic Service. Operation High Jump. With the onset of World War II, he returned to active service and earned 2 decorations as the Chief of Naval Operations. In the early post-war years, Byrd participated in the organization of the U.S. Navy Antarctic Development Project in 1946 and 47, known as Operation High Jump. He supervised the preparation of a study for the Joint Chiefs of Staff of Greenland as a site for military training and operations. In his final years, he was called again to serve the nation as officer in charge of the United States Antarctic programs. This responsibility gave him authority to coordinate government-supported scientific, logistic, and political work in Antarctica. Admiral Byrd remained an influential figure in polar research until his death in 1957. What strikes me most about this, in 1926 he took leave and organized a private-funded expedition to the Arctic, supported by Admiral, John D. Rockefeller Jr., and for some of the conspiracy theory people, they will recognize the names. So this, to me, explains why they were able to get the money to do this expedition. Or perhaps it could be all bunk brought on by those elite to perhaps mislead and scatter all the conspiracy theory crowd into seeking other outlets instead of focusing on what really should be. However, I don't feel this is the case. They went, they found something, they came back. Whether it was inside a cave or not, we truly do not know. I think it was not the Navy that was so much keeping him quiet as much as his own desire to keep it to himself. Should it have been me in his shoes, I would have kept this pretty much to myself as well. In his interview, he talked of how the North Pole was tapped out resources-wise, and Antarctica was the new frontier, etc., for exploration. I do feel that he knew something on the South Pole, such as another entrance, or perhaps technology that could help us advance as a society. Since we were not there, we can only speculate as to what happened, if it happened, and what the possibilities are. In his Hollow Earth diary, he talks of how the Master calls the inner Earth Ariani, which sounds an awful lot like Aryan race talked of by the Nazis. Upon leaving, the Master says goodbye in German, Auf Wiedersehen, furthering my note that perhaps willful deception in this matter. He talks of disc-shaped craft following the plane and that had swastika-type shapes on it. And in the diary, the Master calls it a Flügelrand, which is, as most conspiracy theorists surmise, is probably one of the reasons we see UFOs, and this is possibly what is the UFO. Do I think this happened? I'm undecided. However, I do believe that something happened, and he had proof enough to show, and the Navy furthered his exploration of the South Pole. But do I believe the diary to be suspect? Is there the actual diary we could see? Much to my surprise, the only thing I could find was his handwritten notes taken on his trip to the North Pole. No such handwritten diary of his trip into Hollow Earth. I should say no pictures or video. Does this make me a skeptic into the story? Only into the fact that there is no proof that it's truly something he wrote. For me, I would just want to see the diary, be it pictures or video. It is not for me to decide one way or the other if it exists, but I can offer up my opinion. Do I think that this inner Earth person told him of treasures? Possibly. It's amazing how a diamond company opened a mine near the Arctic Circle, and oil companies started drilling. Albeit decades later, perhaps technology had to catch up to the knowledge to engage in such endeavors to the extreme conditions. What concerns me, however, is the person who was called Master. To me, that brings to mind the Master Mason. What if there is a true Master Mason above all, and is this being it? The Nazi connection seems telling in that it could be a psyop to try to get people focused on one thing and not the broader picture of all the things that are going on. Who truly knows, for we were not there. I do keep an open mind to all possibilities. I was looking into Admiral Byrd's Antarctica interview. He talked of how it is full of resources, which explains why the fascination with it by so many countries for decades now, including by the Nazis. In the interview, Admiral Byrd talks of the coal that is there, so much that it would supply the whole world for a very long time. Evidence of oil. And we all know the greed for oil. And he said even evidence of uranium. He said that there is land mass the size of the United States that has not been seen by human beings. Of Antarctica without the ice, and was very. There is many evidences to the many other civilizations of the past. I was looking at further information on Admiral Byrd and came across a movie he was in as himself called The Secret Land. It talks of an expedition the Navy underwent called Operation High Jump. If Admiral Byrd told his senior officers of the Hollow Earth, then why would they put him in so many other expeditions unless they truly believed him? In order for the Navy to truly believe him, I'm sure they would have had to have proof of some sort to verify the existence of such an absurd-sounding claim. One of the ship's name was Olympus. It kind of almost made me cringe in thinking of the movie called Olympus Has Fallen. When the ship crosses the equator, there's a ceremony for landlubbers. They are presented to King Neptune's court. Those who have not sailed before are called polywogs, or tadpoles. They raise the Jolly Roger flag, which in itself is telling. It is the Skull and Bones flag, another secret society thing. Now, I wanted to add my opinions on Hollow Earth. I do not believe in itself it exists. I do believe there's a series of caves or deep caverns that could seem like a hollow earth, even lit up with certain self-illuminating minerals, etc. I do not believe that a hollow earth could be true due to the fact that seismograms of earthquakes start in one side of the earth and come out the other side. This was mentioned by the way of Nolo in a previous show, and I find its logic sound, and therefore it has helped me in my decision on the matter of hollow earth. With the hollow earth, the seismograms would show that it's hollow. A brief explanation of seismograms is the simplest method of locating an earthquake on a globe is to find the time interval between P&S waves' arrival at several seismograph stations. The distance to the earthquake from each station is then determined from standard travel time tables and travel time curves. Great circle arcs are drawn on the globe using the distance of the earthquake to the station as a radius. All the arcs should intersect at a common epicenter. Furthering my thoughts that it is not accurate that there is a hollow earth. Another idea I had on this is if there was truly a hollow earth that Admiral Byrd flew into and was able to land, there was no obstacles. Where is the light from the inner sun that is reported? Again, I was never there, so I truly do not know. I try to see things logically. Do I think Admiral Byrd found something in the North Pole? Yes. Do I think it brought him to Antarctica? Yes. I do think, however, on some level, it was not hollow earth, however, like a Shangri-La, or as in the Hindu belief, Shambhala. Agartha is frequently associated or confused with Shambhala, which figures prominently in Vajrayana Hinduism and Tibetan Kalachakra Theosophists. I can't even pronounce that. In particular regard, Agartha is a vast complex of caves underneath Tibet, inhabited by evil demons called Asuras. Helena and Nicholas Roerich, whose teachings closely parallel Theosophy, see Shambhala's existence as both spiritual and physical. It also talks of blue-skinned people there. The Hindu teachings, among other things, a form of ancient Shriya Shmadi, which develops siddhis, or psychic abilities, to make life go well for the practitioner. And once the person has this or was born with, can see this land or its peoples. In many teachings in many cultures, it is all said the key to these magical cities, etc., is inner wisdom and peace. No man who has evil or negative emotions or doings can find such a place. Until we are ready as a human race to set foot in that domain, it will remain hidden. There was a movie in which this was touched upon called The Celestine Prophecies. In order to see the city beyond this perception, one must give up all ego-centered emotions and desires, such as the need to dominate and steal others' energies, or for a lack of a better term, a troll. One who seeks to try to anger another human, or to try to always talk of being a victim or negative things in order to draw energies off the other person's. Hence the term, don't feed the trolls. Because once you give them, they feed and will not leave their source. One must be of their own power to achieve this higher level of being. On the downside of this Shambhala or Agartha, there is the many, many, many negative nuns over the decades who seek out whichever can be given to them. It's only damned, so to speak, inside. Soviet secret police Gleb Boki, writer Alexander Burchenko, Soviet Foreign Commissariat Heinrich Himmler, and Rudolf Hess sent German expeditions to Tibet. Occultists, noting the Nazi link, all were in search of Shambhala. Now this, to me, is in search of the same thing, just different names. Every culture talks of a secret town or land that becomes visible to only those who are truly worthy of it. I say it's always there. I say we can all get there if we do away with ego, pride, and become what is needed to ascend literally into this next existence of life. I think that if there is a hidden to us place, such as Shangri-La or Agartha, or as Byrd called it, Ariana, then the entrances are many. The Arctic region would explain so many different countries trying to set up in the Arctic Circle. Admiral Byrd set a precedent in his achievements in this area. I wanted to point out that the term Agartha was termed in 19th century French occultist Alexander St. Yves Alaverde, published in the first reliable account of Agartha in Europe. According to him, the secret world of Agartha and all of its wisdom and wealth will be accessible for all mankind when Christianity lives up to the commandments, which they were once drafted by Moses and Jesus. Meaning, when the anarchy which exists in our world is replaced by the synarchy. St. Yves gives a lively description of Agartha in his books as if it were a place that really exists. Situated in the Himalayas in Tibet, St. Eve's version of the history of Agartha is based upon revealed information, meaning received by St. Eves himself through attunement. The explorer Ferdinand Ossendowski wrote a book in 1922 titled Beasts, Men, and Gods. In the book, Ossendowski tells of a story which was imparted to him concerning a subterranean kingdom which exists inside the earth. This kingdom was known to be Buddhist as Agartha. However, I was surfing the net and came across a Google Earth map of Nepal mountains, and I seen a blackened out spot. It piqued my interest as this is the side of a mountain, so why black it out? It was huge. So I looked into what the natives call Mount Everest. They call it Sagamarta, which is too close to Agartha for me to not be a coincidence. In some sites, it talks of Agartha as having Sanskrit-type language. Nepal is Hindu, so that kind of answered that for me. I have thought of, what if in each corner of the world there exists an entrance to immense caverns and caves that hold advanced beings and civilizations? The powers that be cover it up to keep the rest of us out of it, for whatever reason, be it to protect it from us or to protect us from it, or other nefarious reasons we have not yet begun to understand. The reason I bring up Agartha is it's most associated with the Hollow Earth theories. Admiral Byrd talked of the master in Hollow Earth, said it was called Ariana. So I offered up where the term Agartha came from for this show on Admiral Byrd. As most would have come across this information on their own if they want to, it just makes it easier to bring it up in the show for those who can't do internet searches due to being on unlimited access to internet, or a phone in itself could be limiting. So I also wanted to add that if there was a possible hollow Earth, that our planet would not be a planet but a satellite, which would mean it was made, not created naturally, or in some instances like a Dyson sphere, etc. Perhaps it is possible. However, if that was the case, why would there be deposits of coal or gold that still has to be mined, etc.? Why not do this before creating such a place? If it was naturally occurring, then how did it form itself? How can there be an inner sun that just floats there? Gravity in itself would destroy the crust from being too thin at the rate of Earth's spin. Too many other questions are not fully answered to satisfy my logical mind into accepting that this is a possibility. There is other info I have on this, but won't go into that on this show. But if you're of a like mind, you could probably do search and find the truth of it for yourself. Everyone finds a truth that helps them on their path. This is mine. Does it make me right because I believe or not believe in it? No. Does it make anyone else right or wrong because of their beliefs? No. Unless we're there personally, it's all subjective. The trick is to see beyond just one linear line of thought. In order to bring light to one subject, you have to show the entire spectrum of things that touch upon that. This is Pussnboots, and you're listening to Biased Propaganda Radio. I want to thank our listeners for coming tonight for a discussion into what forms the idea of Hollow Earth, brought about by the Admiral Byrd Diary. I want to hand the mic over to Cool Hand Luke 74 now for his ideas on the subject. And thank you, Luke, for hosting the show with me. I look forward to hearing your thoughts and ideas on Admiral Byrd.
Good evening, folks. Very well done. Now let's get into the woo part of this a little bit, shall we? Now with Project High Jump here. What I don't get though is supposed to be an expedition, and they had 4,000 troops, an aircraft carrier, a couple destroyers, and many other vessels. If it's an expedition to the if it's an expedition to the Antarctica, then why so much military might? That's what I don't get about it. And the thing is about this they lost a destroyer and some men. What exactly were they fighting there? Some people believe they were fighting the Nazis, and the Nazis had a base there, and had a base there since the beginning of the war. Now, the Germans admitted it. They had traveled across Antarctica, they took pictures of it, and they found something really interesting there. And I was reading in the chat room, LOP chat, that the Nazis probably their secret little weapon, the bell there, the Nazi bell, what many people believe that could be possible at time travel, or perhaps a new kind of aircraft that can also cloak itself. There's many tales of this. But there were some reports during an expedition of disc-shaped objects coming out of the water at high speed. And supposedly out of the diary, these disc-shaped objects were firing at the ship and actually sank one. And it was supposed to be a long expedition of 6 months, I do believe. They left after 2 months. And some say they left in a hurry. So what exactly did they discover there in the cold, in the ice? If they left early for a reason. And if they lost the ship and some men, they were fighting something. So what exactly were they fighting? I mean, some people say they were fighting an alien force, perhaps Nazis. Well, if the Nazis have a distinct object, they didn't use one of those during World War II. So how did the Nazis become so advanced so quickly? That's the question. Maybe nature is harsh down there. Yeah, crowd, but to lose a destroyer, I mean, it's a pretty big ship. And then have some men come back dead. More than 12 men were reported dead from the mission, if not more. And there was reports, though, when they were exploring the Antarctica, that they found some lakes there that were not frozen, that they were warmed up by something, probably geothermal or whatever. And the woo part of this segment is they found an area that had grass and trees, supposedly, too. Now, if you read our comic books like the X-Men, there's a place called the Savage Land in the south, near the South Pole. It describes the same thing. There's stories and theories of that in many different cultures, too. And what I find fascinating, too, is they found a map it was done in the 1500s. It shows Antarctica with no ice on it. Perfectly drawn. And there was no planes back then. How the heck did they make that map? Yes, Kyle, the Prial Reese map. It makes me believe that at one time there was a civilization there on Antarctica. Perhaps it was a lost civilization such as Atlantis. Maybe Antarctica is Atlantis. And somehow a pole shift moved the Earth suddenly and it became frozen. I do know one thing, though. You just can't go to Antarctica and just explore like you want to. You have to have tons of permits. You have to have permission. And only certain people are allowed there. So what exactly are they hiding there in the Arctic? And as Kyle said earlier, too, and when they were doing samples of Lake Vosk, I do believe it's called, the Russians, they were really quiet what they found there. I know Vladimir Putin got a free sample in a jar. So after that little expedition there with the samples, they never said what was inside the samples, if there was any life down there, whether it be bacteria or a little fish swimming around. Because that lake has never been touched, not in so many years. A very long time. Pristine waters. Not touched by man. An ecosystem not touched by man, anything could develop there. Kind of interesting to find what the Russians found there in that lake. And after Admiral Byrd's little adventures and stuff, he kind of went quiet for a while. Either he was told to shut up, not mention what he found down there, or he just wanted some time off due to the war. But what makes you wonder, though, why the Germans wanted to base it in the first place? Some people say they wanted to control the Arctic waters. Others say a hiding place because they were losing the war. But the base was built before the war even happened. And an interesting fact that in the World War II, there were still 100 missing submarines from the German side they have never found. 100 submarines. Yes, maybe some got destroyed. Maybe some got lost, but 100. They went somewhere. Some say South America. Others say Antarctica. And he thinks it's a hot spring, so you could actually go underneath the ice into certain caverns, underground caverns in there, and perhaps create a naval base. A mysterious place I'd love to explore, though. I mean, if I was in better health and it wasn't so freaking cold. It's one of the coldest places on the planet, folks. Yeah, there's hot springs there. Admiral Byrd discovered hot springs over the lakes, that the lakes would never freeze over at all. So, Room, what do you think Admiral Byrd actually found there? Did he find a hollow earth? Did he find Nazis there? What do you think he found? That he was so quiet about, and he did a journal, and it wasn't discovered until he died. What do you think, Amber? What do you think he discovered there? Do you think he discovered aliens, Nazis, perhaps nothing at all? Ice walls, aliens, and some LOP room. Raoul says, I highly recommend the Frozen World. He found the edge of the Earth. Let's not go there, shall we? You think he discovered aliens, perhaps an alien base, crashed UFO possibly? And what if the Nazis discovered an alien race there, in a base there, and these aliens taught them some technology? After all, how would you explain the Nazi bell? It's their technology toward the end of the World War II was amazing. And we got some other scientists at the end of the war, and our technology kind of leaped a little bit. If you have some free time, I recommend you find some books on what the Germans were doing toward the end of the war, and you'd be amazed at their technology. And that technology was very advanced for its time, and it came out of nowhere, basically. It's like, where did they get this technology from? Some people say it was from the occult. Other people say it's from an alien race. But let's face it, we almost lost World War II. If the Germans would have built the atom bomb first, we'd all be speaking German right now. Germany's mistake was going to Russia during the wintertime, too. He was too prideful at the time. But this shows about Antarctica and Admiral Byrd and why he was down there in the first place. It was towards the end of World War II, and he wanted to discover more of Antarctica. But, like I said before, 4,000 armed troops, an aircraft carrier, a couple battle destroyers. Why all that military might just for an exploration? Fully funded by the Navy, mind you. None of his own money at all. The military funded it all. So, and Amber goes in the room, I wonder if that city is actually Atlantis. That's what I'm wondering too. Like I said, they found a map in that's from the 1500s that shows Antarctica with no ice on it whatsoever. So it could have been a pole shift of some kind that caused the continent of Antarctica to switch suddenly and become frozen. And Carl's in the room says, Lovecraft talks about how the early Arctic expeditions discovered aliens. There's many rumors out there about that, of different people who explored Antarctica and they discovered from crashed UFOs, abandoned bases that were beyond our technology, and weird places in the Arctic where there was no ice or snow and there was grass and trees growing. And of course you have the hollow earth theory where they found a cavern that goes in the hollow earth. There's two races down there with a miniature sun that warmed everything up and gave it light. That's a little hard for me to swallow, basically, with that one, but if you're an alien race and you want to build a base, where would you want to build it? As far away from the population as possible. And Antarctica would be a perfect place for an alien base. Undetectable until modern times. And now, like I said, you want to go take a trip to Antarctica and explore around? Oh no, they'll stop you. You have to have permits, you have to have permission, and very few people get permission to go there and explore around. So what do you think about that, Pussnboots, about why Antarctica is off limits to most people? What reason do you think is behind that?
Well, I'm not exactly sure as to what possibly could be going on. But what really drew my attention from the very beginning of looking over all of this on Admiral Byrd was the fact that he took leave from the Navy. He got together with Ford and the other high powerful names to come up with money to do the North Pole. I believe he found something, and whatever that was led him to Antarctica. Now, if people, you could correct me if I'm wrong. Probably my memory may not be exactly perfect on this, but I remember Ford being involved somehow with the Nazis, and if one of them had went and funded the North Pole expedition, maybe they went and talked to the Nazis, and the Nazis are freaked the heck out and want to get down there and find whatever this is that they're down there trying to find or have found. So that's definitely my take on that.
Thank you for that. And if you study World War II records, Germany put a lot of money into exploring the Antarctica, basically. Tons of money. Unbelievable amounts of money there. And you know they had a base there too, and nobody talks about it. Nobody talks about what they discovered there when the war was over. You know, in case you kind of wonder, you know. And of course you have the rumors Hitler, you know, was never suicided or killed. He went to Antarctica or he went to South America. And there was recently a series on the search of Hitler, basically. It was kind of a fascinating, series, and it really touched on Antarctica. I think they had a couple bases there. The Nazis did, and why Admiral Byrd went on his expedition was to destroy the bases, basically. Well, something happened. Like I said, they lost the destroyer, lost a number of men, basically, and they retreated early. They were supposed to be there for 6 months, and they stayed there for like 2 months, and then they came back home. And then they did their expedition afterwards later on, and that was never talked about at all. But there's reports in his diary, there's reports from some of the men that they saw disc-shaped objects in the sky that were faster than anything we could ever design ourselves. And supposedly he warned the U.S. military to get ready for them because we have no way of stopping them. It's like we found these objects in the sky that fly faster than anything we've ever seen before. And we need to prepare for that. And Lucas said, lots of money, damn straight. What did they get for it? That's a good question. Look at all the secret projects the Nazis had. The Nazi Bell. They were trying to build an atom bomb like us. And they had other things there, like disc-shaped UFOs that could actually fly on a different propulsion system. And like I said, look up World War II, what in the war, and some of the factories they were trying to build these disc-shaped objects, new kind of aircraft that were supposed to overtake ours easily. And Amber, yeah, you're right. And Ludwig goes, Byrd got his ass handed to him down there. Can't very well publicize an ass kicking. That's true. What about the V2? Admiral Byrd diary said the master called it the flung inland. Posey BMW made it. It's a UFO type craft. And we had our own disc-shaped objects at the time too during World War II, but theirs was way more advanced than ours was. Let's say that we did get our ass kicked down there from the Germans, whatever, but if we did get our ass kicked down there, then why didn't we continue the war on? Why didn't we go after them again? Or why did they come over here and do it? Did they only have a couple crafts and that was it? That's my opinion on it. Well, the mysterious Admiral Byrd. One thing's for sure, though. Something piqued everybody's interest. Russia wanted to fund the expedition down there, too. The Germans did. I think somebody found something down there. Whether it was alien race, an alien base, alien craft. Or maybe it's just resources, though. But you don't go down there for resources with 4,000 armed soldiers and an aircraft carrier and other ships. He goes, I heard his son died in a mysterious, suspicious way at the age of 68. I wouldn't doubt that. And Zubiel says, because the Nazis infiltrated and took control of our country 70 years ago. The Fourth Reich, I do believe it's called. And yes, Pussnboots, uranium is down there. They discovered uranium. The Germans did, the Russians did, we did. So, Antarctica is full of resources, though, but you have to go through all the ice and snow to get to it, though. What else do you have for us, Puss?
Well, I wanted to go back to some of the things that you had talked about Like, I found that the lakes that are not frozen that they found and the grass, etc., I find that telling. Like you were saying, there has to be something down there, whether it be the like the hot springs, etc. But if that's the case, how rich would that water be? Just absolutely like almost like a fountain of youth type thing, because it's something that hasn't been around. It hasn't been destroyed by massive amounts of, chemicals from, whatever. And I also wanted to touch on that. I've heard there being an ability to sail into the glaciers. The Nazis supposedly found an entrance into a glacier, and I don't know if that was based off of a movie or they made a movie out of it, but I do specifically remember that. And sometimes when we have, let's say, a movie or a story, etc., there has to be a little bit of a basis of truth. It, doesn't mean particularly that there is, but I do believe there was an entrance. Because why the sudden rush? Just all of a sudden, everybody clamored at the same time to try to get there. So to me, that tells me that they did find something, and I do believe it's an entrance.
They've done scans of the planet recently, and they said there's caverns down there, and there's caverns more deeper and wider and bigger than the Grand Canyon. Tons deeper, everywhere. There's more evidence for a hollow Earth than there is for a flat Earth, obviously, and the way the planet formed, you're going to have huge caverns around in the sublevels of the planet. So maybe, yeah, there is a huge cavern or underneath Antarctica. And they explored down there and they discovered these caves. As for the Earth being totally hollow and the miniature sun being down there, it's kind of far-fetched, to be honest. But who knows what's real anymore? Usually these stories come out elsewhere and movies made about it, and there's truth to every rumor. Every rumor has some truth to it. I think they discovered some down there. I think the Nazis did too. And their technology went leaps and bounds when it happened. The great unexplored region of the world is Antarctica and the oceans, basically. And we're not allowed to go there. They have their reasons, obviously, and the true reasons they're not allowed to us. We can't hop on a plane or a boat and just get our packs ready and go walk around Antarctica. We'll get stopped by the military. I'd love to see it, though. It's pristine land. I mean, purest water around. You have lakes there that have never been touched by man. Lake Vosk. So left alone for thousands and thousands of years. Who knows what's developed in that lake? It was its own ecosystem, like I said. There will be some new creatures there, new fish. What do you think, Puss? Yeah, polar bear wrestling. Liberty. And all those penguins down there, too. Perhaps a pyramid down there below, too. That's another theory, too. And supposedly someone discovered a pyramid down in Antarctica through some of the radar they were doing down there. This is a rumor, though. There's no proof of it, obviously, but they have discovered some new pyramids recently around the world, too. Isn't that funny, though? There's pyramids in almost every nation. They have no idea why. You think they're all connected? I do. There's a theory that says there's an inner sun. Well, it's a little far-fetched theory. I mean, it might explain a few things, though, to be honest. We've all read or seen Journey to the Center of the Earth. That's basically based on his expeditions. One day we'll know the truth. Maybe. What do you think, Pussnboots?
Well, My whole thing, though, is I don't understand the reason for the entire continent to be covered so high in one solid sheet of ice. Nowhere else, it seems, on the planet is that possible. Why did this happen only there? To me, it seemed like a deliberate action. It's been there for tens of thousands of years. Somebody had made this map, which you had reminded me of, which I think is awesome, because that map was exceptionally detailed. The satellites proved that that map was accurate. So something happened. So how did it get specifically straight up, straight across ice? And what's fascinating is they do the drilling into the ice. They take core samples. So it's something that has happened. It has progressed. But why does it form that specific pattern? When we see glaciers all over the rest of the world, oh, I don't know if it's all over the rest of the world, but at least the ones I've seen, they take the shape of a mountain, and it just like kind of flows down, and it goes into a lake or whatever. So it is hard for me to actually grasp why it goes straight up, and planes have a hard time landing on it because of its sheer height. So, and another thing is the temperature. Why would it only be that excessively cold there? Why not also in the Arctic? The Arctic is nowhere near those temperatures. So there has to be something that we cannot fathom at all to bring about all these anomalies that just are not explained by science. They can sit here and try to tell us one thing, but it doesn't answer everything. So there has to be something there. Or else, why would they be looking so hard? And when I say they, I mean almost everybody. I knew somebody who was actually down in Antarctica, and I asked him if he's seen the diary of Admiral Byrd, because there's a museum there with Admiral Byrd's stuff in it, and he didn't remember seeing that diary. But he talked about how things were left there, just in a pristine state, still to this day. The lack of anything, someone had mentioned in the chat room about there's no microbes that, kill off things when it's dead or whatever. I mean, it's just, I understand it could be the extreme cold, but what if that's a defense mechanism for whatever's under the ice? Let's say Antarctica. Let's say that was made so that way it can protect us from whatever it is, or protect it from us. I have no clue, but it's questions that should be answered. So, yeah, that's my ideas on it.
Let me ask you a question, Puss. Okay, we have cities in Siberia. It's cold there all year round. We have cities in Alaska, out by the North Pole. We have cities in Europe that are cold all year round. Why don't we have any cities in Antarctica?
Yeah, that's the one question that just is not going to be answered, I don't think. There has to be some reason that this is going on just there. And it has to be absolutely something there that's creating it, be it a force field or some kind of forgotten technology from civilizations in the past, because we are not the only civilization. We're not the only advanced civilization. There has been many before us, including during the dinosaur times. So there has to be something there. Why the temperature changes in all the different parts of the world, and only this place has that extreme. So, yeah, that's how I feel about it.
And Corral brings up a good point. The treaty clears free of that, though. Why the treaty? You can't build cities there, though. We have. I don't get that, though. Obviously, there's something there they don't want us to see, or discover. That's my opinion on it. But back to the map again. This map they found in the 1500s. This was Antarctica ice-free. How and why? How did they get the map? How was it in such detail? You have to be from the air in order to draw like that. Well, you don't planes back then. I know he's going to fly overhead on a balloon. I mean, come on. That's just fascinating. It's one of the greatest mysteries of mankind, that map, Who drew it, And at what time period was that continent had no ice? It just blows my mind. That's the one thing that sticks out more than Admiral Byrd's journey there is that map. It just amazes me. Somewhere, somehow, somebody flew over there and drew it, and there was other maps out there too that boggles the mind. How do you get these maps? All you could do back then was just sail around. There was no aircraft back then, as far as we know. It was just, did we have help? Was it from the aliens? I mean, and like I said, what time period was that continent without ice? And I think at time period when it was without ice and there was humans around, there were some civilizations there. And there should be some remnants of cities around there too, to be honest. So I'll go ahead and close it up, Pussnboots. This was a fascinating chat, actually. I mean, one of my favorite ones is Admiral Byrd and the Hollow Earth theory.
Yeah, it was an awesome show tonight. Thank you, Luke, for coming here to host with me. I found some of the items you were talking about rather fascinating, and I'm going to have to go back and look more up on the subject for sure, because I, in the time frame, did not find out as much as I had thought, and I found a lot. There is so much more that we don't know on so many levels, on so many things, but this I find fascinating because of all the things that is going on to this day. So, this is Pussnboots. Thank you for listening to Bias Propaganda Radio. I'm going to turn it over to you, Luke, for a few minutes, and I think that's about the rest of our show here.
Yeah, that's our show, basically. And next week on Friday, it's confirmed now, finally, after much haggling and never mind. And next week, Friday, at 10 p.m. Eastern Time, will be one of the epic chapters of LOP Voice Chat. For the first time ever in its history, will be a live debate of the flat Earth theory between our very own ghost scientist and Jibby Jedi. There'll be 10 questions asked. First person 6 points wins. The chat room will decide who wins each and every round. Noah will be the moderator at the time. So each person will ask the other one a question, they'll get a chance to retort, and at the end of the retort, you in the chat room will vote who won that round. If it goes to 5-5, there will be a tiebreaker question. I don't think we'll go that far, to be honest. But be here for that. You get to be part of it. You get to vote. And vote honestly, folks. If you think Flat Earth theory is bullshit and he wins a round, make sure you vote he won the round. Let's be fair about this. Let's give him a chance at least. It's going to be epic in the fact that Ghost is actually a scientist. So he's going head and head with this actual scientist. So get ready for some lulls, some good moments. Hopefully it'll go longer in 6 rounds, to be honest. Hope it's not like a total blowout, but it could be. So be here for that. You're going to be part of LOP history, the first ever live debate.